Exposed. Deep inside a mountain bunker at Fordow, centrifuges spin in cascades beneath layers of reinforced concrete and stone. Under the 2015 nuclear deal, Iran agreed to cap uranium enrichment here and at Natanz at just 3.67% purity, appropriate only for power reactors. For years, international inspectors verified that limit, but in 2018 the United States withdrew from the agreement and Tehran began to reverse course. By early 2021, engineers openly pushed enrichment to 60% at the Natanz pilot plant and later at Fordow. 60% already defied the old boundaries, yet Iran justified it as material for radioisotope production. The true shock came when inspectors detected particles of uranium enriched up to 83.7% at the Fordow site in late January 2023, though the IAEA later assessed this as an unintended fluctuation. This was not a deliberate step. The IAEA assessed it as an unintended fluctuation, though it still brought the material into a zone just below the 90% weapons-grade threshold. The discovery occurred during routine environmental sampling, revealing traces on centrifuge equipment. Iranian officials called it an unintended fluctuation, but nuclear experts noted that reaching that level requires deliberate reconfiguration of the cascade. At 83.7%, the substance is almost indistinguishable from military-grade material. The hidden production crossed a red line that even Russia and China had urged Iran not to approach. So, beneath that same mountain bunker, a secret drive had turned declared limits into a fiction without any official announcement. That fiction depended on a physical reality, fortresses built to hide the truth. Fordow, carved into a mountain near the holy city of Qom, sat beneath roughly 80 meters of solid rock. It was designed to survive bunker-busting bombs, and its very existence was kept secret until Western intelligence exposed it in 2009. Once revealed, Iran claimed it was a backup enrichment site, but the real work happening inside told a different story. By early 2023, Fordow housed cascades of advanced IR-6 centrifuges enriching uranium to 60% purity, and inspectors later found particles of 83.7%, just a technical step away from weapons grade. The facility operated under narrowed inspection rights, cameras were removed, and access was blocked. Iran argued the mountain itself was its sovereign shield. Not far away, near the Natanz enrichment complex, new tunnels were being dug deep into another hillside. Satellite images showed extensive excavation, with hardened entrances and ventilation shafts. These were not declared to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Intelligence assessments suggested they were meant to house even more advanced centrifuge cascades, possibly for the final push to weaponization. The mountain vaults had become the heart of a parallel nuclear program, one that treated declared limits as a mask. These were the vaults for Iran's most sensitive atomic work, off-limits, hardened, and hidden in plain sight. Deep inside those hardened mountain vaults, the smallest traces began betraying what Iran's planners had thought was perfectly sealed. In early 2023, inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency took environmental swipe samples from equipment at a site Iran had never declared. When those samples returned from the lab, the results upended every official Iranian narrative. The swabs contained uranium particles enriched to 83.7% purity. That is not a civilian power grade. That is weapons-grade territory, a mere technical step from the roughly 90% needed for a nuclear device. No enrichment level close to that had ever been acknowledged by Tehran. The particles were invisible to the eye but unmistakable under mass spectrometry. The isotopic fingerprint of the particles was unexplained by Iran's declared stockpile, raising questions about a possible undeclared production. Technically, moving from 60 to nearly 84% is not a gradual, accidental process. It requires a deliberate short-duration reconfiguration of centrifuge cascades and a sharp, monitored jump in input rates. The sample geography suggested the work had occurred at an underground location, almost certainly a pilot facility with advanced IR-6 or IR-9 machines. The agency demanded answers. Tehran scrambled, eventually offering a vague explanation of unintended fluctuations during transitional operations. It was a claim that defied the physics of gas centrifuge enrichment. Fluctuations in most cases produce slight deviations, not a violent leap across the weapons-grade threshold. The particles told a different story. Someone had run a compact cascade hard and fast, producing enough near-bomb-grade uranium to prove out a weapons design, then purged the lines. The environmental swabs, however, had captured the telltale residue. Iran's most protected strategic secret had started leaking, not through a defector or a cyber breach, but through atoms caught on a cotton wipe. That residue was a starting point, not an answer. It told them where uranium had been, not where it was going. Mossad and CIA analysts now fused three streams of intelligence. Satellite imagery from the OFEC and KH-11 series tracked a pattern of heavy trucks moving at night between a declared centrifuge workshop at Natanz and a nondescript warehouse near Isfahan. The vehicles used civilian license plates that may rotate periodically. Human sources inside the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran provided the next piece: a schedule of unmarked convoys carrying centrifuge rotors and uranium hexafluoride canisters, routed through a tunnel network near the Fordow enrichment plant. Cyber intercepts then decrypted internal communications from a front company, used to procure vacuum pumps and maraging steel. The intercepts revealed code words for 3 additional covert sites, buried under agricultural land roughly 40 kilometers southeast of Qom. Analysts correlated the timing of truck movements with spikes in encrypted data traffic from the same grid coordinates. They mapped a hidden supply chain, rotor assemblies manufactured in one location, quality tested in another, then moved to the deeply buried halls for final cascade installation. The puzzle snapped into focus. What Iran believed was a scattered, untraceable archipelago of hardened sites had become a visible single network. The atoms on that cotton wipe had unlocked a map. To hide its most valuable strategic material, Iran may have constructed a world of mirrors and shadows. The movement of the highly enriched uranium, particularly the 83.7% purity stock, was masked by a sophisticated operation known as maskirovka, the Russian term for military deception. They relied on a web of front companies, often registered to false names, to procure specialized materials and move components. The actual uranium was not stored in the main, declared nuclear facilities. Instead, it was transferred through a network of underground tunnels, some burrowing deep into mountain ranges, connecting what appeared to be innocent industrial workshops. Decoy facilities were built above ground, designed to draw attention and absorb scrutiny. The real vaults were hidden within these mountains, behind meters of reinforced concrete and rock, believed to be impervious to any surveillance or strike. The security protocols were immense. Access required passing through multiple checkpoints, each manned by a different branch of the Revolutionary Guard, creating layers of compartmentalization. They trusted that the uranium's location was not just a secret, but geographically untouchable. This was the core of their strategy: to render their ultimate nuclear asset invisible and invulnerable by scattering it across an archipelago of secret, hardened sites. But the deception was not perfect. Every movement, no matter how carefully concealed, leaves a trace. A signature can be carried on the sole of a boot or in the minute particles clinging to a container's surface. Their belief in total physical security would prove to be their greatest vulnerability. The microscopic particles told a story no satellite could capture. Swipe samples collected from an unmarked facility near Fordow reportedly revealed uranium enriched to a high percentage. The IAEA's confidential report, circulated in late 2023, shattered Iran's denials. In Washington, the evidence may have landed on the president's desk alongside an assessment about Iran's material. The White House Situation Room became a crucible of competing doctrines. Diplomatic channels urged patience. A renewed nuclear deal could cap enrichment. But Jerusalem saw a red line already crossed. Mossad's director presented imagery of hardened storage bunkers dug beneath the Zagros Mountains, their ventilation shafts disguised as desert rock formations. Strike plans were drawn: bunker busters, cyber infiltration, even a commando raid. The Pentagon warned of regional war, Hezbollah's rocket arsenal, and Iranian retaliation across the Strait of Hormuz. A third path emerged: a covert operation, deniable, precise, and aimed solely at the stockpile's integrity. The proposal fused Israeli technical ingenuity with American intelligence reach. It would not destroy the uranium, but contaminate centrifuge cascades and storage containers so thoroughly that the material became unusable for rapid breakout. The weapon of choice: a tailored chemical compound, delivered by proxy, that corroded the delicate rotor assemblies from within. In a secure video conference, the green light was given. No airstrikes, no fingerprints, just a whisper in the machine. The operation's name was once classified, but its objective was singular: turn Iran's most protected asset into a liability without a single missile fired. But the digital domain offered another path. A new weapon, tailored for this specific target, was deployed. In late 2023, a sophisticated cyber operation, a direct descendant of the Stuxnet legacy, found its way into the network. It was a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. The malware was designed to infiltrate the industrial control systems of a concealed centrifuge hall at Fordow. Its mission was precise: to manipulate the sensitive operational parameters of the cascades, enriching uranium to roughly 3.5%. The attack remained dormant, mapping the system, until a predetermined signal triggered its payload. Without warning, the cascades of advanced IR-6 centrifuges were commanded to spin at wildly erratic and excessive speeds. Safety protocols were overridden. The delicate machines, operating under immense pressure, could not withstand the violent oscillations. Bearings shattered, rotors tore themselves apart in a cascade of catastrophic, self-inflicted damage. The hall was filled with the sound of metal screaming and shattering. Roughly 2 full cascades, containing nearly 130 centrifuges, were rendered useless scrap. The facility's external monitors showed nothing. No explosion shook the mountain, no thermal signature betrayed an airstrike. But inside, a critical part of Iran's stockpile production capability had been physically obliterated. The operation proved that even the deepest bunkers were not sanctuaries. Their most protected machines could be turned against themselves by a silent, untraceable command buried deep in the code. The cyber sabotage had softened the target, but the core of Iran's concealed stockpile remained physically intact. That changed on a moonless night in November. Israeli special forces, drawn from the deepest tier of Sayeret Matkal, infiltrated a nondescript industrial warehouse on the outskirts of Isfahan. The building, disguised as a textile storage facility, sat within a sprawling military-owned complex roughly 15 kilometers from the city's nuclear research center. The unit moved in complete silence, guided by precise intelligence that had pinpointed not just the location, but the exact room where highly enriched uranium containers were stacked behind false walls. Within 11 minutes, they breached the inner vault. Operatives seized hard drives, encryption keys, and over 400 pages of production logs detailing the 83.7% enrichment runs. These documents later revealed timelines Iran had denied even to its own scientists. But the operation's most decisive act was not extraction. It was the subtle sabotage of the centrifuges themselves. The team deployed high-intensity neutron emitters, specifically Californium-252 sources, directly against the storage flasks. The sudden neutron flux induced fission in the uranium hexafluoride gas, transmuting a fraction of the fissile material into isotopes that poison chain reactions. In effect, they may have compromised the stockpile at a critical point, potentially rendering a significant amount of near-weapons-grade material difficult to use for any rapid bomb assembly. The containers themselves became silent evidence, their structural integrity intact, but their contents forever corrupted. Iran's most protected strategic asset may have been neutralized without a single shot fired, according to some accounts. Less than 72 hours later, commercial satellite passes over the Kojir region reportedly captured something Iran never intended the world to see. The images, first analyzed by open-source intelligence analysts and later confirmed by defense officials, showed a precise scorch mark radiating outward from a single point, a facility that did not exist on any official map. 3 structures had been reduced to rubble. The signature was unmistakable. The ground penetration, the radial blast pattern, the absence of secondary explosions. This was not an accident. This was a kinetic strike, calibrated to destroy hardened underground chambers without triggering a larger environmental catastrophe. What made the imagery devastating to Tehran was the location. The site sat roughly 15 miles east of the capital, buried inside the Kojir missile production complex, a sprawling military zone previously linked to solid-fuel rocket development. Iran had never acknowledged any nuclear material storage there. But the satellite proof told a different story. Heat mapping showed the unmistakable thermal residue of dense materials subjected to extreme temperatures. The wreckage pattern aligned with models of a reinforced subterranean vault collapsing inward after a direct hit. Within 48 hours, under pressure from international inspectors wielding the imagery, Iran issued a carefully worded admission. The facility had housed research materials connected to the civilian program. The claim collapsed almost immediately. The location, the depth, the multiple layers of blast protection, none of it matched peaceful use. The satellite had not just exposed a site, it had exposed the lie. The most guarded secret in the Iranian nuclear apparatus may have been laid bare from 400 kilometers above the Earth. Within hours, the IAEA board convened an emergency session in Vienna. The evidence was undeniable. Satellite imagery corroborated by signals intelligence showed precisely where Iran had stashed nearly 45 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium and a smaller cache of 83.7% material. The latter was alarmingly close to weapons grade. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi issued a rare direct statement demanding immediate access to the site near the Zagros foothills. Tehran's denials collapsed under the weight of the data. Diplomatic isolation followed with brutal speed. The E3, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, led a harsh censure resolution at the IAEA board. But Tehran was not finished. In a bold and calculated retaliation, Iran's nuclear establishment made two critical moves. First, it publicly escalated its program at declared sites like Fordow and Natanz, pushing enrichment levels to roughly 90% weapons-grade purity. This was a direct dare to the international community, a test of its resolve. Second, and far more covertly, it initiated a massive relocation project. Learning from the breach of its supposedly secure sites, the regime began moving its surviving stockpiles of 60% and 83.7% enriched uranium to even more secret and deeply buried facilities. These new bunkers, believed to be hidden within military complexes or carved deep into mountains, were designed to be invisible to satellites and impregnable to conventional attack. The operation was a lesson in adaptation. While the world focused on the provocative public enrichment spike, the quieter, more dangerous work of securing the core of the program proceeded in shadow. Iran had been bloodied, but it was now applying those hard lessons, betting that its next cache would be forever beyond the reach of its adversaries. The strategic asset had been compromised, so they would simply build a better vault. The operation proved devastating on paper. Analysts estimated roughly 90% of the targeted fissionable material had been destroyed or irrecoverably scattered across hundreds of meters of pulverized bedrock. For a brief moment, the clock appeared to stop. The immediate ability to fashion a working device from the secret stockpile vanished in that single night of precision bombardment. But the dust had not yet settled when the grim calculus of delayed threat replaced the euphoria of tactical success. Iran retained the one element that could not be obliterated by bunker busters, the meticulous human repository of the process. The physicists, metallurgists, and engineers who mastered the complex cascade logic, the P2 centrifuge rotor designs, and the chemical conversion pathways survived and were fundamentally unharmed. The fissile atoms were gone, but the intellectual architecture for creating them remained distributed across a dozen universities, research centers, and basement workshops. The capacity of the Natanz and Fordow enrichment halls, while damaged, was not extinguished. Cascades of IR6 and IR9 centrifuges, spinning at supersonic speeds, were already being manufactured in new machine shops, tunneled deeper than the previous ones. Intelligence intercepts in the weeks following the strike revealed a sobering reality. A directive from the Supreme National Security Council prioritized immediate reconstitution. Satellite thermal imagery showed fresh excavation and tunneling activity at 3 hardened sites in Isfahan and near the Zagros Mountains within a month of the operation. The window of increased security it had bought was being measured not in years, but in seasons. The victory was real, a necessary punch to delay an inevitable trajectory, but it was a deeply uneasy and strictly temporary one. The bunker had been emptied, but the blueprint had been safely tucked into the mines that had drawn it.